The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, a group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong here with Mr. Dan DuPont of HawaiiTracker.com, bringing you guys another Hawaiian Volcano Tracker update. Today is Monday, June 12th. Sorry, try to get Monday, June 12th, 2023. A little bit different time for us, but a lot happening on Kilauea with a new eruption happening up there. And we thought we would just keep going while we can, and we do have some schedule changes coming up, so that's why we're coming to you guys today. How you doing today, Dane? I know it's been busy. Kilauea's been busy.
Yeah, we've had busy things going on as well. Just playing catch up right now, and glad to be able to provide this another update.
Right on, thanks. Yeah, Dane will be taking questions in the chat, leading discussion there as well. And we'll be talking about the latest changes in Kilauea, which you guys can see here, a time lapse taken from the nighttime for the last a little bit less than a week here. And we'll review that, talk about some imagery, some of the comparisons to other eruption onsets. And yeah, that'll be our menu today, Dane. Anything you want to add before we get into it?
No, I think you covered what's on the agenda there. Just make sure if you've got any questions, get in the chat on the Hawaiian volcanoes. It's our specialty there. And let's get into it.
Right on, appreciate that. So, okay, let's switch the screen here. And just a second here, let me get myself set. And all right. this week's Hawaiian volcano summary. Well, on this week's a little tongue-tied this evening. Okay, let's try again. On this week's Hawaiian volcano summary, you can see Kilauea has receded from occupying the full crater floor with lava to fixating here on that southwest side of the crater floor now. Lava is still coming out pretty vigorously. There's still fountainings occurring in the southern part of the crater floor, more or less in here, and a wall vent in the far southwest of the crater over here. And both of those areas are feeding lava into the crater. But because the central area is uplifted and there's this trough around the outside, it's creating this horseshoe-shaped lake, which has receded from its tips to more of a crescent-shaped here in the last couple of days. See that receding happening right here. There's still lava circulating in that central western basin. So there's a source coming up from beneath the crust that's feeding these sources on a caldera floor, as well as the one coming out the wall as well. So that's the short version of what the changes on Kilauea have been for the past few days here. And what I'll show you next is a close-up of that wall vent, which the live camera is focusing on from time to time. So I've just captured a few of those images and pieced them together for you guys, just to show you that that area that was once just a crack with lava coming up through the rubble has actually been spattering and building up this new spatter cone over top of that opening. And that cone is growing, it's spattering and building higher on itself, it becomes unstable, it collapses, and you see that whole evolution occurring here. And so that's happening pretty quickly over the last couple of days here, and will likely continue to happen. And you can see that at the bottom of this cone, there's a river of lava that's issuing out, and it's flowing downhill towards that crescent lake of lava. So that's the highlights of the changes on Kilauea. And of course, the live stream from the USGS is still running, and here you can see that western basin filling. There's a southeast pit also filling, and here just behind there's a little bit of a levee forming on this crescent lake that's here to the south, further over there. And just off the screen is the fountains of lava that are emerging from that area up in here. So lots of changes in Kilauea, lots of minor changes, evolution of the landscape, and the most dynamic part of the eruption, the first few days here. But as is typical, the effusion rate seems to have decreased. The gas emissions have decreased alongside of that. And the eruption is focusing now on that western part of the crater. And that's the Hawaiian volcano summary for the week. And of course, we'll get into more detail than that, but just to keep it current and brief for those who don't have as much time to keep our full update here today. So yeah, this is the live camera. The live camera has been actually doing some automatic panning back and forth, so it rotates between different features of the caldera floor, which I find fascinating here, and so we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But first, let's get into some of our measurements and monitoring data here. So while I get that lined up here, let's switch the screen for you guys, and we will talk about our hazards first. So we actually will start off by showing you guys a couple of images, and here's images released by the USGS of the scientists measuring the gas emissions out of the crater. They're using this piece of equipment called Fourier Transfer Infrared, FTIR, to shoot down through the gas at some very bright infrared source. In this case, it's a lava fountain. And then they can measure the composition of the gas and in between that point source and their collector here. So fascinating to see that. That's the first picture of the scientist there with the FTIR. And there's a second image here as well, showing from 3 days ago, it looks like, when they were up on the rim. Here, data logging and taking measurements down into the crater. So we don't always get to see the actual sampling imagery, so nice to point that out. And I thought I'd turn us now to the actual data plot. So here we have for the last month of time at the bottom, and tons per day on the left. So at the top of this graph is 80,000 tons per day, and then down here is 0, this second to bottom line right there. So you can see that prior to the eruption onset, levels were down at background in a few hundreds of tons per day, which is still a lot. It would be enough to get an industrial operation a fine from the EPA. But it's a volcano, so of course it's just pumping unperturbed. And even from that low background, the mountains really spiked quite a lot. So the highest measurement plotted on this graph is upwards of 70,000 tons per day. The USGS initially reported 65,000 tons per day, somewhere in here as their point, so maybe that moved a little bit. In any case, very high values. It dropped down pretty quickly, down to 20,000 tons per day by the second or third days there. And now it's down below 10,000 tons per day, with the most recent measurement being 8,900 tons per day 3 days ago down here. So that's a pattern that's pretty typical, that it starts off really high and then drops down and tails off, and you'd expect that to kind of keep tailing off downwards as time goes on here. So it's decreased substantially. That likely indicates that the amount of lava coming out has decreased as well, and maybe that's why we're seeing the pattern of lava on the crater floor changing a bit here and focusing on the western side. But that measurement's important because this is the source of our hazard, the actual gas emissions. So here is our VOG mapping project forecast for the next couple of days here, with Kilauea as our point source, putting out 11,000 tons per day in this model. And given the weather conditions, you can see most of that fume is blowing to the southwest over Pahala, Ocean View, Naʻalihu area, South Hawaii, Miloli'i area, and upwards into Kailua Kona as well. Volcano area as well has a bit of it, although mostly it's blowing up and away to the west in that area. So if we look at the Purple Air Citizen Science Network, you see in Volcano it's actually pretty green, but here on the Kona side you're getting more impacts of that VOG showing up on the sensors. Looking at the national park itself, that's up here. All the different charts of the different stations are all showing green everywhere. So really not a whole lot of impact on the ground. However, you should be prepared for that if you have any sensitivity, and follow all park directions if you're going to view the eruption, of course. Interesting, the USGS noted this camera on today's update. The KP camera that's up on the side of Mauna Loa, the Mauna Loa Strip Road. Looking down towards Kilauea, you can see the obvious big bright glowing spot right there. But what's interesting is you can see the gas cloud actually rising up here, and it gets stuck in this layer between 8,000 and 10,000 feet up. And so that seems to be where the gas is collecting, at least. And at some points in time, you see that little lens right there. And that's where it's blowing and sticking in the overnight hours last night. I thought I'd point that out because we do have today's update. And maybe we'll switch now to our monitoring tagline and show you today's update from USGS, which is similar to the last couple of days. And so we'll just focus on today's. Monday, June 12th, around 9 a.m. We are at alert level watch, aviation code orange now. And Kilauea is erupting. Activity confined to Halemaʻumaʻu crater within a caldera, and no activity along either rift zones. So that's the short and sweet. Multiple fountains remain. The fountains have decreased in height and remain up to about 9 meters or 30 feet high. So that's the most common question we get up at the park, is how high are the little fountains that you see from up there? Well, they look little from up there, but they're still 30 feet, 9 meters high. They note the lava covering the western half of the crater and a broad horseshoe around the central uplifted area. And the active lava lake in the center, which is called their western lava lake from prior eruptions, has been reactivated, fed by a vent in its northeast corner, and also feeding a smaller circular pool just southeast of the lake. Here's an interesting little detail that's new and specific to today. The surface of the western lake rose approximately 1 meter overnight, probably due to construction of a levee around the pond. All previously active lava features in the eastern portion of Halemaʻumaʻu now appear to be stagnant. They note the live stream, they note the tilt is still decreasing. Here is their observations from KP-CAM, show gas plume from Kilauea rising to and remaining trapped beneath the inversion layer at 8,000 to 10,000 feet above sea level. And no different SO2 measurements here, and no different rift zone measurements here as well. So that is the official text update from the USGS. As always, we're trying to elaborate on that and fill in the details using more USGS data here. So turning to the monitoring plots, here we have 2-day tilt at the top, showing about a 1 microradian drop over the past couple of days with a little variation. It actually seemed to rise slightly there yesterday, and then and cycled back down once again, and now maybe is rising once again. It's got a little bit of the cyclicity to it, superimposed on this longer term decrease, right? So maybe it's overall deflating because that's the pattern of eruption. But we've seen deflation and inflation cycles before, and maybe this is something along those lines, or some similar process where you're having little pressure variations as a lava is bursting out of the vent there. So underground, it's kind of catching up and then slowing down and catching up and slowing down. And keeping in mind there's different amounts of gas building up, and you might have big bubbles and small bubbles collecting and moving. And all of that dynamics underground can be why you have these ebbs and flows of the ground tilt towards the surface here. So overall, minor changes, nothing to really be concerned about. Something that we notice. Looking at a longer period of time for the last week, here is a lava depth plot. So eruption onset is right here. We have that initial burst coming through where we jump up those 5 meters or so. And then we had that decrease, right, where we saw the USGS report that perhaps it was because of gas loss from that initial very gas-rich burst of lava. And then since then, we've had a truer filling rate. So we had the lava actually refilling there, and then a more slow filling coming upwards the rest of the week here. And when I note that extra meter that was gained this morning, that's this little rise right here, right in there. That's that extra building a levee. And building a levee means the lava kind of spills over the edges and it hardens on the edges. So it makes the edges slightly taller. And then the lava can fill a little bit higher within that pit, and then the depth becomes deeper there. So that's what's going on there. And as the lava keeps pooling, we're seeing levees being built and breaches of the levees and some interesting little things like that happening on a crater floor nowadays. So that's the 1 week plot for depth, and 1 week plot for tilt you see here just below it. And the overall pattern of the bigger picture, now that we zoom out, we don't even see the little wiggles, but the overall large deflation is what dominates the signal here. Right? And note that when we had this big jump with the eruption, we're going from somewhere around -15 to +20. That's 35 or so microradians of offset there. So that's a scale signal that's really convincing, and that's why all the other little things are kind of just little variations that may or may not amount to much there. So moving on to the last month view here. So zooming out a little bit more in time. Here is our entire eruption on just the right couple bars here of this plot. And there you see a little bit more accentuated. We had that initial burst, drop, and then refilling and more steady filling with several of these little, looks like levee building events like that. And at the same time, there is a tilt at that same time scale, dropping off a little bit more smoothly as seen in that view. Interestingly, if you look at SO2, this is the ambient station at Sand Hill. It just so happens that it appears on this plot that the gas values might be increasing. It just happens to be the wind directions and the sensor position. If you look at some of the other sensors that don't show this pattern, they might be higher at the beginning or higher in the middle, but in this case it's higher at the end. It just goes to show why you shouldn't use this one exclusively, because here's our actual SO2 plot just below it for the month. And you can see here's the gas value is actually dropping, going down, which is not the pattern you can tell from this single point source, and why these are something we sometimes are careful to interpret there. So the big picture with the gas really is that it's decreasing here. Still a lot coming out, still causing a lot of fog and bad air in local area visibility issues, but fortunately I haven't heard of any health impacts yet, although I'm sure that people in the area who are sensitive, we've heard from before, are surely having impacts as well. Within that same time right there, with that eruption frame on the right side of this last month, here's the earthquakes, and you can just really see this massive drop off in earthquakes down to in a range of 20 to 30 earthquakes per day across the whole southern volcano, including Pahala. So it's really crashed to almost nothing here, and earthquakes are not something to be concerned about and talk about much longer here. However, here is the plot for the whole last year, showing that buildup we've had over the last month and a half or so right there, and now this drop in values with our eruption onset right there. And we saw a similar pattern right in here for January to March eruption, where we had low values, so we might expect low values coming in over here as well to the right. And there is that buildup to that previous one. It was a little bit smaller than one we had now. And after that, you expect it to kind of stay low values. So here's low values once again for the previous whole last year when the eruption was ongoing too. So they won't drop down to nothing, and they'll collect over earthquakes per week's time scales like that. But you can see it's down quite a bit, and we'll look at a pattern here in a map shortly as well. There is the gas for the year. So relatively speaking, higher values than we've seen even back in earlier 2023, and we don't have any previous data back here. And GPS is showing us something interesting at the right side, but it's a little bit lacking the most recent data. So just to recap, here is the upper plot as the north-south distance across Kilauea caldera, and it does seem like it had jumped up here recently, and then it may have dropped afterwards, but we don't have the most recent data points here on the right, which you have usually one plot per day, 1 point per day. So it's hard to tell what's really happening in the nuance there, but what we can see overall, the big pattern appears to be consistent still. Looking at the other components that don't have this difference, it does look like there's been some sagging and dropping and as a result of the eruption, as you would expect. So we'll just wait for this to catch up, and then we'll have better information and insight into the actual details of how the ground moved and shifted to allow this eruption to begin. On the east rift zone at Pu'o'o, still the same pattern, still decreasing, contracting, no magma moving into there, building any pressure or anything like that. Tilt meter similarly showing that, so even if there's data missing from the GPS up here, we can be content that the tilt is also showing that. And finally, the third piece of this school of evidence is the whole rift zone is showing no seismicity whatsoever. Here is a whole east rift zone, hardly any earthquakes there at all. We still have some on the south flank, and these are the summit events that were building up. So this is the last week of earthquakes. It does include the eruption onset, so that is the beginning of the eruption, and really nothing happening since. To really show you the earthquakes more properly, I gotta switch to the earthquakes page, which is here. And here is the last 24 hours showing, if I zoom into Kilauea crater, there's a whole bunch of nothing in there. Still some south flank events, still some Pahala events in the area over here, but really no earthquakes to speak of. And zooming out, you can see even Mauna Loa, nothing happening there, and elsewhere on the island, quiet everywhere. So those are the earthquakes. And what we'll do now is look at some of the thermal maps, but I thought I'd go back to pull up some of the old maps that we actually have. So in case you're wondering, since the 2018 collapse, we have had 4 different outbreaks, right? We had December 2020, that's what's shown on the screen here. We had September 2021, we had January 2023, and now we have June 2023. Those are the 4 that we're dealing with, right? So I thought what I'd do real quickly here before we, just kind of compare them. That's 2020. That's 2021. That's 2023 January. And 2023 June. So what I thought would be interesting would be to try to compare these a bit. And I'll go back to the very beginning here to December 2021. And I know it's going to look small on the screen, but I want to keep it the same size for now. So bear with me while I go through this little exercise. And I just wanted to point out where the vents actually are, right? So we actually had a north vent that was here. There was a lower west vent and an upper west vent there, and there. So what I'll do is I'll just draw a little line there and a little line there, and a little line there where these vents are actually located. So then I'm going to leave those on screen. Let's go to 2021 September. And just compare where those actually are. So we actually had a new west vent pop open, a little off to the side right there. And a line of central vents occurred as well during that eruption. There, and there, and there's one down here as well. Okay, I'm just drawing a bunch of dots on here. Let's progress to January of this year, our third one. All right, so in that case, you could see that no vents opened up in similar spots there. We actually had the vents opening up further east. They are here, here, kind of in this area right in there, right? And this is, of course, not exactly the exact moment, so there might have been something more in between the area right there as well. But let's keep going. And finally, here we are to today. And now you can see our main vents are, let me see if I can change the color here. Let me change the color and put it on. Let's make it pink maybe, right? So our vents today are there, is where this began. The southern vents are here, and we have one on a crater wall that's down in here. Not to mention the ones in the east there. And we have this few ones up here to the north and the lake there, and there. Right? So what you can see as a result of this exercise, all the different places the lava has come through the crust, whether it's the actual crater wall or the crust of the crater floor. You can see it's like a dartboard, and there's like hardly any two in the same place. It's kind of all over the place. but all of them have been within this pit, right? Which is interesting to me. Let me pull it back to that original image where we can see before everything got filled in, right? So in comparison, you can see that much of these are occurring near that very bottom part, the innermost collapsed crater. But there are a couple, in particular, the ones in the west, right there, that original first west vent, the second west vent, and now our third west vent, which is now, we're calling it the southwest vent here on a crater wall, all seem to kind of line up. And the ones that don't seem to fit in are the ones up here at the north end, which you see are not actually rooted in this deep part of the lake. They might be connected to that outlet source in some other way beneath the crust rather than coming straight up through the ground. Hard to tell though, because there actually is a connection more or less moving from the southwest to the north. That does kind of line up a little bit, but that's just one option to consider as we imagine how the lava is coming up through the crust and where it's going from there. So let me clear this and I can zoom it in for you guys so you can see a little better here. That original 2021, or this is this December 2020 onset, right? This was the north vent that began back in December 2020. And then that lower west vent that was quickly buried, and the upper west vent was the one that became the dominant vent for most of the 2020 to 2021 eruption. And the reason is the lava lake filled all the way up, reached this depth, drowned this vent, kind of blocked it off. So it actually then switched coming out of this hole, and that's what fed the eruption for the next 3 to 4 months or so. And that's how that eruption began. A little more closely at 2021. There you see the western vent was actually not too far above the lava lake level, and it was fairly quickly drowned, but the eruption did manage to keep on going for a while. We did also have these central vents that quickly became inactive as eruption entered it was a move past its first day. And so it's interesting that this pattern that we see back in 2021 is not unlike what we're seeing today. We actually saw vents opening up in the center of the crater floor and then move all over, flood the entire floor of the crater, and then shift to the west, right? Which seems like it might be what's happening now. So the one that happened at the beginning of this year in January was actually the different one, the one that doesn't seem to fit, because all the vents occurred here in the southeast. They'd open towards the center, but seem to migrate southeast instead. And that's different from all the other ones that we've seen, because here we are again, coming back to this eruption, where the vents are, zoomed in too far, where the vents are now, you see, in the central area to the southwest. And then you have these odd ones here to the east and to the north as well. Okay, so I thought what we could do is switch to our visuals and re-examine that eruption start, because we do have a new video from the USGS that's released in higher definition here, showing the onset of eruption. So let's look at our observations. Let's start off by looking at this video from the USGS that's newly released. And we've seen this before, but we just haven't seen it with this resolution. So I'll play it, zoom it in, so you can see what's going on here. A very bright spot coming from the middle. I'll just pause it right there. It's hard to see, but this back here is that central island. So what we have here, we're looking from the west, is that spot to the northwest of the central island is where that eruption actually pops out. This right here to the right is that western basin that's going to fill with lava here shortly, but it's still not. You can see all the gas coming out from this northeast point, and the lava is going to flood through here in short order to fill the spot. So that's how we actually begin, right? With actually a single fountain, northwest, north would be that way, north. So a single fountain northwest of that central island. So let me advance it here. We've talked about how the lava is shooting in the air and taking maybe 6 seconds to fall all the way down. So that might equate to being 600 feet high-ish or so. Right? Look at that burst all the way up to there and falling down. So we're still waiting for official confirmation, but the measurements and calculations do suggest that it was somewhere in that order of height. And that fountain is blocking everything behind it. We can't really see anything else, but we do see there's no other point of exit of lava anywhere else yet, right? It's feeding this big pond on the floor that's going to start spreading outwards in every direction here, flooding out. But really the important thing is one source. It does appear to be getting longer And this seems to be getting a little wider. Might have began as a one-point source and then migrated south towards that southwest part of the island. So it's coming out of a whole line there on the west side of the island. And you can't see it too well, but right in here is that smoking area still. And we'll see that begin to activate as the lava is coming up beneath the crust here. And it managed to find a way out, but it's also hitting the bottom of that crust. And I don't know if it's exactly lava tubes or if it's kind of archways that seem to funnel the lava against the bottom of that crust in certain directions. But it seems to do something like that. And here goes. Here's that point starting to fill that western basin right there. And so it seems like the lava was coming up. It must have broke through the crust, but we know that right near there is that exit point that connects not only this western basin, but you seem to go beneath that central island and all the way to the eastern basin, which is what we saw in January 2023. We saw lava actually erupting out of there and then flowing through that tube and filling this basin also. So here we see it filling the basin from a similar area, but not quite all the way there. Here it is beginning to fill that western basin right in there. There it is. Lots and lots of gas at the beginning. This would be those massive amounts, tens of thousands, 70, 80,000 tons per day coming out here at the beginning. So the video does go on for a while. Let me see if I can advance it a little bit. I'm gonna zoom it out to do that. And let's find a spot that I want to see next. There it is, okay. So zoom back in, and now here in the background comes a second fountain. So that's behind the island. The island is right here in between. So this is now that eastern side of the island where we saw that previous burst of lava and fountain of lava at the beginning of the year, the last eruption. So there it is, the second one. So here we have that northwest fountain, eastern fountain, and a western basin filling. Pretty cool to see this in good resolution. And as the video goes on, I think that's gonna, in real time, be most of what we get here. I'll advance it a little further. Oh, that's too much. Oh, doesn't like that button. All right. So there it is. There is that last view we have from that video just released. So we can go to other videos. So here we have the actual longer sequence, right? So this is the start of the eruption from the KW camera, and it's showing a bit of a longer sequence of time here. But I thought I could also take us through this one a bit. Okay, so our first frame on this actually shows us two fountains as well. So here we're picking up where we just left off. Lava coming in the western basin, fountain in the back, fountain in the middle. There's nothing happening here in the background yet. On the eastern basin, nothing happening there, and there's nothing happening in the northern vents here yet either. They're going to pop up next. Also, no southwest vent over here yet either. Still nothing happening there. So as we advance the first few frames here, we have a bunch of gas coming and filling the area here. Still no bubbling occurring on this part of the crater floor. And the next frame is different. So now in the next frame, we do see bubbling vents on the north part of the crater floor, right? Showing how they're delayed. So it's not quite clear how the lava got over here. Perhaps it came just through some pathway beneath the crust this way, and then up, because we saw that the depth beneath this part of the crater floor is not as great as in the middle. So maybe something like that. Maybe it came up and deflected that way, perhaps. We can't see what's happening in the back quite yet here, but if I go to the next frame, which does show past the gas, there, now we can see that that eastern basin is fountaining as well. So it does appear that perhaps the lava that was bursting up through underneath the southeast island over here makes its way through, erupts at this next fountain to the east first, then it makes its way to that eastern basin and erupts there, and it possibly could keep going to feed the north vents as well. It's hard to tell exactly how that goes, if it really does make that whole loop like that, or if it goes this way instead. Or the last option, as I mentioned before, maybe that actual crack underground opens up all the way to somewhere over here, but that seems to be the least convincing of the options there. Notice that at this time, we have all the bursting coming up from this old west vent complex area too, all through here. Massive amounts of lava coming up that we did not have just back in here, right? So if I rewind it here, just the central fountains, and as we advance, there is a first one coming up. And advance it, and this one, and this one. Right, the western basin is completely drowned here. We can't quite see it anymore. That central fountain that was west of the island has split into a northern branch and a southern branch right here. It used to be a line all the way across at the beginning. So very quick changes here in the first few hours. And then finally, after sunrise, keep advancing. Eventually, it pops open. Here's a bit of gas on that southwest vent over here. And then there it goes, finally, the last part to open, being that southwest point right there. So a lot of detail in there, but just thought that this is a moment at the start of the eruption to go through all that, because this is the best time for us to try to understand where the lava is actually coming from beneath the crust. And it's hard to tell. We'll never really quite know for sure, but we have the most clues that we're going to have now that we've seen lava move through this system all over the place. And now it's shutting down in the east, so we're kind of coming to the close of that chapter of the eruption. So focusing on the start a little bit more, here is that video from the USGS of the western fountains beginning. So what we just saw, but now in better resolution, here is that old west vent complex. Lava just gushing out of there. Lots of gas. It's the very first gas-rich phase. All the fountains. Oh, let's pull it back to the beginning again. All those fountains erupting through the crater floor, and more than a dozen locations there. There is that one in the northeast. There is a central island. There is the southern branch of it, and east of the island there. So hopefully everything is matching up to what we just talked about on the map. And look at that dome right there. Just massive standing dome of lava bubbling out of that weak zone in there. And one interesting thing to note is that there is this old crust that's been rising in the crater through every eruption so far since the first one in 2020. And the edge of that buoyant center is kind of lines up with these vents here, right? So that's where we're seeing the cracking and the lava escaping from there. And look at that, massive bubbles of gas, little bubbles of gas. You see the surface isn't flat or still at any point anywhere. Same crack coming out different side of the ground right there, bubbling out as well. Beautiful stuff. Yeah, just remaking everything in there. Awesome video released by the USGS today. And there is that wider view. You do see some of the other fountains here in the south there, and at the very edge of the crater as well, you see some. Domes back in here as well. So this is more or less that edge of that crack. It goes something like that. And so that would be the one we've seen ooze-ups from before, but we haven't seen it bust open around the central island to the extent we've seen this last eruption here. So while we're looking at that first part of the eruption, we'll add one more video released by the USGS today, also looking at wind vortices. But this one happens to be a big one, and it's catching that surface of the lava and ripping off that thin crust. So if you're wondering when you look at the lava in the daytime and you see that silvery crust, how thick is it, or why is it not red? This will be a good illustration of how it's red right underneath that very paper, cardboard thin crust there. So this vortex is, a little whirlwind, is spinning over top of that crust, ripping it apart, flinging it in the air, and exposing that red lava beneath there. And of course, it's because of all the massive heat in the area, right? The massive heat causing this air movement to occur. Look at it ripping and flinging those lava crusts in the air down there. Let me rewind that bit and zoom it in so you guys can make sure you guys can see it there. All right, look at that. Ripping that stuff apart. And you can see the camera person is following the vortex. Zoom out. It's actually moved off the lava and going up the talus slope of the volcano. picking up all that ash and dust and funneling it up, and look how high it's throwing that stuff. Way up there. Pretty fascinating early part, very dynamic, lots of interesting details like this in the first parts of the eruption to talk about. All right, that was the vortex. Let me move on, and we'll show you guys a fuller picture of the eruption from the Kilauea camera. So this is the full eruption time lapse thus far, day and night, night and day. And you can see in this view that progression that we showed you at the beginning of the nighttime views of the extent of the lava withdrawing closer to the camera here to the west from that original flooding of the whole crater floor. And you can see that there's quite a bit of circulation still. Lava is still coming out of the ground quite a bit, but it's mostly coming out from that eastern section here. So we can actually, as we look at this, focus in on different parts of the activity and see the progression from that initial onset that we just examined here. So let's start off here at the center. Right, so we can see that the central part where that first lava burst out, there is still a glowing spot occasionally right in here. You can see it's not always glowing even, but there's that initial fountain to start. And then pretty quickly that activity dies down, and that doesn't shoot in here anymore. It still circulates a bit, but it seems like most of that flow that was coming out of there might be directed out this way at this point in time, right? And you can see early on it was likely going back to the east to feed that eastern basin too. But presently it's mostly going over here. Right, this is the background of the eastern basin. There it is, fountaining in the back. Still present here in the first day. Becomes isolated as a separate pond, disconnected from the rest. Still overturning at night, but moving more sluggishly. Still overturning a little bit. Here comes next night, hardly anything, but still a little bit of red. And finally, coming to last night, black. Oh, once again, a very small, quick burst of brightness coming in through there. So one small overturn. It is nearly stagnant over there. Just one little bit of motion throughout the whole day. So likewise, the whole eastern basin is all that same story, right? So it seems like the pathway when lava was bursting out originally, coming up, and it was going everywhere. It's going that way and probably that way. Now it seems to only be going in this one way and has cut off the supply over to the east, and maybe that's what's causing that to actually wane in the east. So part of the system is that northern vent that we're not quite sure how it fits in still. So let's just make sure we zoom in and focus on that to make sure we give it the attention it deserves this week. I know we didn't give it full treatment last week, but there's so much to talk about. So there is the northern vent right there. See, it's activating at the same time. So the lava is actually flowing towards it from this direction within this horseshoe lava lake. And so maybe that's a pathway that's actually feeding it. Or maybe it's a pathway beneath the crust from over here, because you can see that at the same time that this eastern vent is dying off, we're also seeing a northern vent die off at a similar rate. And so one more time, northern vent, eastern vent, they're alive together. Eastern vent stops fountaining, now it's just overturning. And I start seeing stagnation here from the northern vent as well, stopping and fountaining, overturning as well. So those are those sections. Now the action where it's still ongoing. The western basin originally was completely full and flooded. You can't even see its trace, was flowing out into that horseshoe lake. Then as the level drops or this ground around it rises one way or the other, it becomes inset within that basin until this morning when it spills over a couple of times. You might see a couple of flashes in the nighttime right around the edge right there. And that's what's building up the levee. So that's the night before last. Here comes last night. And, oh, nope. Yeah, I guess it didn't show up. It was too fast on there. So, all right. A lot to keep going through. All right, there were two vents on the west side. There was one that was a little bit further north and one that was a little further south. This one further south is the one that's closer to this west vent pond area. It's not exactly the same spot. It seems a little bit off, but it's near that zone with that old west vent complex being more or less in here. So of these two vents, they both burst out really strongly at first, but the one to the north seems to die off pretty quickly. This is the one we actually saw that massive dome fountain area that didn't last too long. And then it focuses the southern part of that western vent here. And it seems to wane, and it starts and stops and starts and stops. And this is a feature that is still active today and feeding lava flows through a crescent pathway into that horseshoe lake as well. So those are the western vents. Okay, the southern vents now. We're getting around. We're almost there. Here's the southern vents. There's several spots. There's one in the south center, one more to the southwest, and one south almost against the crater wall back in here. And so these ones in the crater wall, it's not quite clear if this is part of the circulation coming up against the wall, or if the crack actually is down there as well. We saw vents in a similar area back in the September 2021 eruption. It's very similar to this, where you had southern vents and ones against the wall too. But what's interesting now is that these ones are still some of the most persistent. It seems like most of this horseshoe lake is being fed from this upwelling source right in here, if I can judge it just from the amount of flow here. But really, it's three spots. It's that spot, and it's the western basin, and it's over here, and it's further off to the right, that spot over here too, right? So in this view, it's almost like a line that goes like that. That's the zone where lava's coming out mostly, and it's coming up here, and it's basically flowing everywhere else from underneath that part of the crater. So they're so persistent. The fountains have been dropping in size, but otherwise they're still in the same place, and they're feeding circulation. And most of this lake seems to traverse over here to the clockwise direction around this horseshoe here. But there is a little bit of a section that seems to go over to the east and somehow recirculates back underneath the crust, some invisible way here. All right, so the last feature to examine here is this southwest vent itself, which there it is. It's been building a cone over the last couple of days, as we described early on. Here at the beginning, you can't quite see it. It turns out to be just behind this rock here in the foreground, so you can see most of it, but there it is. Here's a river of lava that's feeding down into that horseshoe lake. You can see this little delta seems to vary in width and size and exactly the particular entry point. Sometimes you get a second little branch, and so it's filling this area back in here. And there's a lot of this zone we can't see hidden behind the foreground here. But mostly it's flowing down towards the center and not up towards the rim here, right? But contributing, and seems to be a pretty well-established path of lava by now, where the lava has been issuing from here just as strongly as anywhere else. I don't know if it's any stronger than the one here in the center of the lake, but it's still interesting to me as a spot being in the highest above the crater floor. We got to wonder, given what we saw in 2020 and 2021, if that becomes a long-term vent because of its elevation here. Once the lava output's decreasing, as we described, and with less lava coming out, it can't push its way through everywhere just as easily. So the easiest path is going to be where it might want to go, and that high above the crater floor might be a good candidate spot there. So lots of detail on a Kilauea camera. I just want to make sure we go over this initial phase, because there'll be plenty to look at and lots of nuances. Let's turn to the F1 camera. It's the same story here, but now in infrared. There is that initial doming vent that shuts off quickly, the southern one. And the southern one has actually built a small cone as well. We'll see that in a live video perhaps. Western basin full. Maybe this is where we see the overflows. There they are, the overflows that occur here last night, as this little pink rim around the edge of this lake, showing that it actually is spilling over the edge there. Otherwise, I don't think we see anything new here that we didn't just see in the KW camera, so I'll just let it play through one more time. And we'll move on to our southern view from the S1 camera coming up next. Lots of lava. All right, S1 camera. Here it is, day and night from the beginning of the eruption. See the glow at night, very different views night and day. So we'll break it down for you guys here in just a minute, but the big picture, same story of it focusing more towards the west here. And this view is towards the north, so north is actually that way. And you can see all the activity focused here on the southwest part. The USGS did release today the first 3 days from this camera as a time-lapse, daytime views only. So here, just daytime views only. Initial fountains, circulation of lava all the way to the east. And really the story is how this eastern section it becomes stagnant here over the next portion of this video. So it's all still flowing and moving. The lava meeting from different sources coming from the crater floor. Slowing down on the east a bit now. Now isolated to a single spot that's disconnected. Still some reaching of that branch of horseshoe, getting close, but not quite touching here, the central part. And finally, that northern flow seems to wane even further. Doesn't quite reach as far. Some overturning happening in the eastern pit here, but not as strongly as before. And eventually you get this big gap, and now you have completely still with slight overturns over here in the east of that eastern pond. Right. So that was the daytime views. And for complete list, let's show you guys the nighttime views, because that's also interesting to look at in its own right. So let's start it over here. Just nighttime views. Full crater floor covered. See, there was a central part that was uplifted in the middle pretty quickly, and then withdrawing towards the southwest, with just occasional flashing happening here in the eastern part. Yep, that was it. Okay, moving on. Lots of things to show you guys. I know I've been going for a while, but for completeness here, let's show you guys the southwest vent. Talk about that a little bit here. So there was a video released today of the first moments of that southwest vent as viewed from the rim of the crater. So here it is, looking from the side. There's just a raw rubble, no cone built at all yet. You see a little bit of spatter kind of collecting on the boulders here in between a little bit. But really just shooting out from several places. There's a lower spot, a middle spot, and an upper spot off the camera right here. And you see them pumping out everywhere and cascading down through the rubble to start feeding this river that is already in place going towards the lower part of the crust of the crater there. A different angle here. Just a little bit more. It's a nice little blade right there being formed right in the middle of those two flows of lava. You start to see a little bit of the spatter building up here. Obviously not a cone yet, but it's starting to collect on the boulders and rise above them a little bit. And so here's a view taken from the front from the actual webcam, showing what that looked like. A similar kind of view, but it's still from the same angle. Because one more time I'm going to play for you guys the edit we have taken from the live camera of how this event has changed just over the last couple of days here. Well, let's loop this. And, okay, let's try again. All right, so there it is. You can see the spatter building up. It actually gets pretty skinny and close off at the top. That top part seems to wiggle and falls in. When it falls in, it may actually block that throat of the thing and may cause lava to come flowing out the sides and burst out the front of it. I need to get a little hint of that as well. On top of that, you do have other variations of how much lava is actually coming out. So sometimes it seems to be just spattering out normally, and other times it's really pumping, and you see it come out, you know, like across both sides. So like that frame right there, you see it's just bursting out and flowing out both sides, out the bottom, still feeding the channel as well. And there was a moment in the live stream that was captured, and we're going to turn to Twitter to share with you guys. This is from Volcaholic, at Volcaholic1. And this is a capture of a collapse from that camera that took place last night. Okay, so this was at, here we go, a little before 3 a.m. night before last. I believe there was another one that happened yesterday as well. That's so it happens happening over and over and over again. But get back to the beginning of time. So there you see the top part falling in, hitting, breaking apart, rolling down as big chunks with lava stuck on the sides. Yeah, pretty amazing. Lots to see. The live webcam view has been really good, and camera panning over to see this vent pretty often. Not as often as the viewers would like. Sometimes it's frustrating to see that actually pan away automatically when something exciting is happening, but it is possible to keep an eye on what's happening in the cone by looking at the live cam there. Really cool changes on the southwest vent. And amazing to think about this whole cone building up in the last couple of days here when it was just a crack in a wall with rubble. And pretty quickly, there it is, showing how more lava is coming out of this hole in the ground to allow this all to happen, right? It's not just oozing up and trickling over the rocks, it's actually shooting up and piling up to this degree as well. So we'll do one more video of the southwest vent, but I'm going to turn to 2 pineapples here, and we're going to share with you guys a video taken from Kupinaʻipali, also known as Waldron's Ledge. So different angle, but you can see another one of these moments when there's quite a bit of activity. So there is the cone itself. Here's a river, comes down this way. Probably can't see that on the screen there. Let me change my color, but there's a river, it comes down this way, like that, into the main crescent horseshoe basin. And here are the southern vents and those southwest vents next to that southwest wall vent up here in the background. Really cool, amazing view here. Really appreciate it. Lou and Anna, you guys are killing it. Doing all those live streams, epic stuff. Look at the bursting that flows down the cone here. Yeah, I think if I were to try to script a scene of a volcano, it would be hard to come up with something better than this. You know, the thing is bursting at the top, it's flowing down the sides, it's flowing out the bottom, it's feeding into a big pool. The pool is bubbling and bursting and moving, and yeah, pretty amazing stuff. Possibly the only thing that might be better is some views here in the background with a little bit more light, but that is coming, and these guys stick around to show us that as well. So it seems appropriate now to transition us into the lava viewing segment of our update, because that is public view that you guys are seeing here. The shot from the public overlook. And so this is something you too can see if you have some viewing aids, right? It's a long way away. It's over 2 miles away from the viewing area. So telescopes, binoculars, big zoom lenses, those kind of things are what's going to give you this kind of view that you see here. So to cover viewing properly, let's show you guys a map. So Kupinaʻipali Waldron's Ledge is this overlook over here, not far from Volcano House in the east, actually. So entrance station is right here. Main visitor center is right here. You park there. You either walk to Volcano House, which has good views. We'll mention that as a viewing area as well. But you can also walk the half-mile over to Kupinaʻipali Waldron's Ledge and get the view from there as well. So 2 good areas to look at from the east. These are the ones that let you see through that opening to this back wall of the vent right in here where that southwest wall vent happens to be. You can't quite see that vent from Kanakakoi, and you can't quite see it from Uakahuna, but you can see it from kind of this area in here is where you can see that back wall vent from, right? But you can't see all the lava lake from all these areas either. So right over here in the east is the area where you can see both of them the most. But let's take you through the paces to show you what a view looks like from each area. However, while we're talking about visitation, it's important to note the park guidance and park safety viewing tips. And the main one that they have at this point in time is to time your visit well. Because if you come between 6 and 9 p.m., you will be stuck in traffic, right? They have rangers on the road. They're monitoring the parking lots. When the parking lots are full, they have to stop traffic. And only when a parking lot opens a spot again can they let someone from this long line into the parking lot. So you can imagine it can take a while to get everyone through and to viewing. So come later, come earlier. Just before sunrise is the best time. Quiet, still, and not nearly as much traffic and hubbub. So keep that in mind. But let's look at some of the views. So we'll start today from the south and wrap around to the north. So Kupinaʻipali, here's the map. We'll start down here and work our way around this way, like that, to show you the views. And the B1 camera, which has been moved back now up onto the wall, is getting a view of what you might get from Kanakakoi. So this is what a view might look like without zoom, regular eye. You can see the lava lake there in the background. The west vent is below behind this little ridge right there, so you can't see it quite as well. I can zoom it in so you can get a better idea looking as you might through a camera or something else. So you still see quite a lot. There is that western basin lake. There is that whole horseshoe lake. There's spattering happening all through here, which is visible. You just can't quite see that one vent in that river that feeds into it behind here. So really good at Kupi but not quite the full picture as it currently is configured. By the way, while we're talking about the B1 camera, there is another video released by the USGS today, which I forgot to throw in here, but let me see if I can pull it up for you right now and throw it in here. Is a video, oh, here it is, of that B1 camera getting moved out of the way. Make sure this doesn't blast us with sound. But this is video shot by Janice Way from the National Park Service, and it's showing USGS helicopter flying in. You saw like a seismometer or GPS station in the background there, coming up close to the crater edge. He flies over some geologists, which you may have not seen, but he's circling around now to collect the load. That's the packed up B1 camera, tripod, solar panels, batteries, the whole package all together. So there's a geologist down here at the bottom. There's one, there's two. Hovering in low. Hovering right above the geologist's head. He hooks the load onto the bottom of the chopper. Gives it all clear. He's making sure his feet are not wrapped around any wires or netting or anything like that, or he's going to go for a very unpleasant ride. So all clear. Here comes the chopper, picking up the panels and the load. And it's just a pleasure to watch this pilot fly. I always am impressed to watch the precision of movements and adjustments to the wind and occurrence and positioning in space here. So here he is flying these panels up and up and up. This is viewed from a Kilauea overlook, it appears. So up on the rim, chopper is coming closer, coming up, almost up against the wall. There's a south silver bank, that big yellow spot on the south side of the caldera. And up, oh, higher, higher, higher. All right, he emerges. That, I believe that's David Okita. Looking down to choose his drop zone right there. Look at that. He's gonna come real still, find a nice flat spot of lava. Look, that thing is not barely moving side to side as he sets it on the ground, letting the slack out of the wire, releases a clip, and he's off. And with no wasted motion, dropping back into the crater right away like that. Man, I feel like the play-by-play guy on a sports team. So that's the B1 movement there, and yeah, this is a B1 camera we just looked at right here from the new position where it's now set up after having been dropped off. So back to our lava viewing from the south here, and you never know if you're going to be at the overlook what you might see. You might see the geologists coming and moving instruments around. We did hear the USGS say that they had left a couple hundred of those seismic nodes on the crater floor that they were collecting recently after that big thumper truck came through, right? The seismo vibrosize. They left a couple hundred on a crater floor to hopefully catch the beginning of the eruption. So they'll be collecting those at some point as well. And you might see personnel down on the crater floor and other cool stuff as well. So, but anyways, back to lava views. Here it is from the south, Kilauea. And as another example of what that looks like, here is a viewer submitted photograph on Hawaii Tracker by Leah Klunk. And there is a view of the lava lake. And there is that behind the corner spot right there where that southwest vent is hidden back around there. So you can see lots to see, all the bubbling, really cool stuff here. Different view for sure. All right, moving along, coming around to Kupi Waldron's Ledge. This is a picture from Lou from Two Pineapples. This is the zoomed out view. There's Mauna Loa. This is what it looks like without any telescope or zoom lens. Thought I would zoom in a little bit to show you guys what it might look like. So here, that's the southwest vent in the background and a bubbling spot there. Horseshoe Lake kind of fans out like that, right? So not the best resolution there, but we do have those guys shooting with high-res images, and here's our a little bit more light video from that same location. So this is from June 10th, their live stream. Similar view after the sun's come up now. You can see those two fountain sources in the foreground and that epic bursting in the background there with more light to illuminate the surroundings here. Really cool. Really appreciate this, you guys. Check out Two Pineapples on YouTube if you haven't yet. They've been streaming every day. And I'm sure we'll do as much as they can since it is so epic up there right now. Alright, we'll leave this for you to watch the rest on their channel. And keep moving around and show you guys now the view from the National Park webcam, which is on Volcano House. This is a view from Volcano House, not far from Kupuna'ipali, for the whole eruption here too. So West Vent is also visible there in the background. Lava Lake visible too. You do miss a little bit of this northern edge of it from this perspective, but you do get most of the view here from Volcano House without having to walk anywhere to Kupuna'ipali, for example. So if you have mobility issues or don't want to walk as far, then Volcano House is by far the easiest place to go and get the best comprehensive picture of the eruption at present. Okay, moving on, going around towards the Uekahuna area. This is down below Jagger by Uekahuna, once again from Two Pineapples, showing the view without any zoom, so a lot more vegetation. Depending on your exact angle, you might see more. They did a live stream there this morning that I thought I would play a bit for you. Let me make sure it's not going to blast us, but here he is zooming in, and there is the, whoop, what did I do here? First the wrong place, huh? Broke my alignment. Find it again. What you're seeing here is a little overflow over one of the levees that's of that lava lake. So okay, maybe here. Back more. All right, so there's from that view in the background, there's Lou. Aloha Lou. There is that southwest vent on the wall. What I'm trying to get is this, right? So the overall big picture. So there's a central island. This right here is that western basin lake right there, that flat spot right there. The zone with fume is that southeast pit just to the side. So just behind it is the big crescent-shaped lake back there. And up there, that's what's got a wall that's been built up. And it's flowing from that southeast, I'm sorry, from that crescent horseshoe lake towards the western basin across a little breached levee right there. So you can go check out their video. It's streamed for most of 3 hours here with this feature evolving and changing over time. So something that, for example, you can see from Uekahuna that maybe you could not see from different angles. So just to point out, it's worth working your way around if you have time as well. Okay, let's move on to, this is Yvonne Bauer. Mahalo for sharing, Yvonne, on Hawaii Tracker. She's got a set of photographs here from that similar area at Uekahuna North. And so here you can see the nighttime view. There is that southwest vent. There is that western basin just in the foreground right there. And then most of that crescent lake there in the background. I'll zoom in a little more. You can see those features. And of course, it's not just about the features. That's always what I focus on, but a lot of artistry here as well. Mahalo for that, Yvonne. I'm going to show a couple more of hers, pan through, so a little bit different composition there. In the daytime, what it might look like, similar to Lou's. There's a lava lake in the background. And interesting gas formations as well. Look at that gas cloud rising above the cone there and flattening out in that morning conditions. And this is viewed from the steam vent area, right? So steam vents areas is now also known as Halemaʻumaʻu overlook. And yeah, really, really fantastic gas image right there. So, mahalo Yvonne, let's do a couple more. This is from Ernesto Ribeiro. Taken, looks like last night or this morning early from Uekahuna. And nice Milky Way view of the glow and the fumes. Notice from this perspective, no direct view of the lava lake itself or the vents. Still fantastic composition and images. But if you go all the way north to the far side of Uekahuna, I'll show you the map, right? If you come all the way to over here on this end of it, then that's what you see. You can't see into the pit as much. You have to walk to the other side of it to get some of the views we just showed you previously here. Still, fantastic views even from the side. Really appreciate this, Ernesto. And along those same lines, one taken from Mauna Kea Visitor Center from even further away, showing stars and a volcanic eruption. I'll zoom it in a bit as well. And really amazing stuff here. And let's give it credit. This was taken by Keith Kefford. So this is from Mauna Kea and also showing Manai Kalani, Maui's fishhook, aka Scorpio, here above the lava lake. So lots of things to be seen, not just from Kilauea, but all across. Mahalo for all our contributions from our viewers, participants in Hawaii Tracker, and from Two Pineapples. Once again, thank you guys. So that is most of our Kilauea update. A couple of final things to touch on here. One is Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa is not doing anything unusual, but because it's been a little while, and it might be a little while again, we thought we'd touch base on Mauna Loa. Here is a tilt meter Mauna Loa that's showing the variation. It was showing steady up for most of the time since the eruption. It's still doing that long term, steady up, but with a little variation here that's happening in between. So either some small adjustment or break in the pulse of the feeder, which is normal. Variations are normal, or potentially have the possibility of some Kilauea effect on that as well, as we know that Kilauea was getting really pressurized in this zone up to eruption. Here's the actual beginning of the eruption, but the fact that I see this turn around and start rising once again before Kilauea erupts leads me to believe it's nothing to do with Kilauea, it's just some little variation of the supply and filling in Mauna Loa itself. So that's all normal. The important thing with that is it filling enough to pressurize and cause lots of earthquakes? And the answer is no. Earthquakes per day, the most is 6 in the last week. That's hardly anything. Compare it over the last year. Here's how that looks, earthquakes per week, and here is the typical values you get for build up to an eruption. Hundreds per week, we're down in like the maybe 1 dozen a week or so range right there. And zooming out to the last 5 years, even more dramatic. We're all the way down here and see the long build-up. So we'd expect to see months ahead of time more of this kind of pattern, which we're not seeing anything yet. So all still quiet on Mauna Loa. And the earthquakes that are occurring are very small and spread all across the summit like this without any cluster anywhere. So really nothing interesting there, but just to note that all is well and no effect on Mauna Loa from Kilauea's eruption has been noticeable. So that is Mauna Loa, and we'll do a couple of final community items here before we turn to some questions. And let's get this on a screen. So just to note once again what's happening volcano-wise for the community. There is still this seismic node project wrapping up, as we mentioned. There's still 200 or so instruments that look something like this on the floor of the crater by Halemaʻumaʻu, with a timeline of them getting picked up in early June 2023. So that's now, we're about to come to halfway in June, but we did hear this little adjustment that they might have left a few extra. Maybe those will be the last ones to get picked up. Right, so we will have to wait for the data in case people are wondering. It's going to take, they estimate, 3 years or so to get results from this, right? How long will the data analysis take? The study will involve at least 3 years of analysis, interpretation, and results and reports on topics described. So it's really, we all can't wait for it, but we have to wait for it. And there'll be lots to talk about when that comes out, because we'll see all the pathways and more clarity and better resolution to know what's happening down there and maybe understand retroactively what these systems are doing. Maybe deflation inflations will become more clear. Maybe the pattern of lava through the crater floor become more clear, but all of that's going to depend on the results in the upcoming years here. So there's that in the community. There is still public input open for the draft air tour management plan from the national park. That is only open for a few more days until June 20th. So actually a little bit more than a week from now. And go on the park website to contribute to that if you would like here. And the last thing to mention, of the events in the national park after dark in the parks are ongoing still. and I'll just point out one of them, which is coming up June 20th as well, and that's about Uekuhuna, the Thomas A. Jagger Museum and the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. This is park archaeologist reviewing the history of that area, the cultural significance of it, and this is all on the eve of them redoing that area. They're going to tear down the building, make it a more natural landscape, make a better viewing area. And so this is one of two talks that's going to focus on that building and that area. So this is the one coming up this month. And then the following month in July, about a month later, is going to be Don Swanson speaking about the work the USGS has done at that building. So two-parter there, and I hope that we will have the benefit of Pineapple streaming. It's still a little ways out, so we'll have to wait to see if they are able to commit to that or not. But that's the main highlight to point out to you guys coming up is next Tuesday, June 20th, at the Visitor Center National Park about Uekuhuna. So, Dane, that is it. I've talked myself out here.
All right.
We do have some thank yous to say.
Yeah, do some thank yous, and then we got a few questions as well. May not get through all of them. We're going a little long, but we will get through some. I want to thank, we've had some super chats come through first and foremost. Hal with a $20 super chat says, since I keep missing the actual live broadcast, I appreciate the support there, Hal. And then we had Timur come in with $20 and say, Hawaii Pod, thank you for your work. Appreciate the support there as well. I do want to thank everybody else that tuned in today. We rely on viewers like you to get the information out there and help get this stream seen by more viewers. We don't have a budget for advertising, so it's all word of mouth and organic stuff. We'd also like to thank the County of Hawaii through the 5i Grant program. They've helped provide funding to keep this type of content, as well as our short videos and our written updates going on a regular basis. So we appreciate their support on that. We do have a couple of questions here. If you're ready for those, Phil.
Yeah, let's do some discussion. Yeah.
All right. So GH asked, was this activity being classified as a new eruption?
Well, I haven't heard anything official yet about that. But based on what we heard Dr. Kinhan say at the beginning of the last eruption, that it was in a new location, that they were classifying it as an eruption based on that. And I showed you guys the maps of how that last eruption at the beginning of this year happened more in the southeast part of the crater. So now we're back in the western part of the crater. And one thing that might be more ambiguous would be if everything was happening beneath the crust. But we actually have a new crack with a new vent on the wall of the crater where there's never been one before. So that to me is, if it was me, pretty convincing that that's a new location. And based on that, I personally, right now, am calling it a new eruption until I hear anything otherwise from the USGS, right? And even when Ken described the last eruption being termed a new one, he did say that at some point in the future, the viewers have the right to come back and re-examine the whole sequence as a whole over the several years time frame. And so they may decide at some point that it's not a new eruption, but for now, we're going to call it one, and that's the discussion I can have on that.
Kenny asks, how long has the volcano been recharging between each eruption into start? Is there some kind of pattern there?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, this time it recharged for 3 months-ish exactly, right? It was almost 3 months exactly to the day. And that would be the other thing, if it had erupted 1 day later, it would definitely have been outside of the 3-month window and definitely an eruption, but it kind of borderline in the gray zone there. But so in this case, it was 3 months. The last one, it recharged for 1 month. The one before that, it recharged for 4 months, or maybe it was 5 months. So not exactly a pattern yet. Only 3 intervals to go on. But you can say that the longer it does recharge, then the longer the outburst may last. So for example, the last eruption beginning January 2023 only recharged for 1 month, only lasted 2 months. Maybe there's something there. Right? The very first one, December 2020, that one recharged for 2 years. And that one went on for 4 months. Right? Of course, it had a lot of makeup work to do to get through the rubble of the 2018 collapse, so that's not exactly fair to call it 2 full years of building up. It wasn't the same as it is now. The one in September 2021 built up for, call it 5 months, and it went for over a year, didn't it? September 2021 to December 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not exactly clear there. It's probably more important what the actual dynamics of the rocks underground are. Are the rocks getting pushed further apart? Do they get wedged further apart? And is that crack open to stay? Or when the pressure drops because it actually wiggle back to be more closed. It's like that little nuance, that kind of thing, which we can't see, which makes it hard to predict, really, right? So if the pathways are more open, if they're less open, if there's more areas, if there's more pathways elsewhere in the caldera, if the magma actually go and relieve pressure as well, that can matter as well.
Right. And then those intrusions we count as failed eruptions, and those are essentially, it could have just as easily got to the surface, for almost the same price. A little bit more,
yeah.
it's there.
Yeah, exactly. So we should analyze those as well to talk about, exactly, recharge time and pressurizing and all that. But that's now you see how difficult exercise actually is to do all that, and then still you have no pattern emerging as the bottom line comes out of it.
Right. Kahoa Aloha asks, could there be mixing of the lava from previous lakes, or is each lake too dense for the newer magma to mix with? Is there unique chemistry at all, or are they indistinguishable?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have a good answer yet. I think we did see the USGS actually sample the lava from the very first phase of this eruption, so maybe they'll be able to extract some information from that, right? My gut tells me that there absolutely must be mixing of the lava. I mean, the fountain's coming through that whole lake, and maybe you could argue like if it's well mixed or not well mixed. Maybe it's not too well mixed, but it's got to come through it, and it's got to entrain some of it and push it out as well, right? So I mean, that seems to be the most obvious point of discussion there, because we know the lava isn't solid. It is denser. It is degassed to a great extent as well. So there is a limit to how much it can be entrained. It probably is sitting lower within that pit there. But you saw the force that that fountain burst out with, right? It might have shot hundreds of feet in the air, cracked open spots that the crust has not been cracked before. So all that together would lead me to believe that there has to be a lot of mixing. We saw the lava come underneath that northwest part of the island, flush over to the west basin, flush over to the east basin, flush over to the north, flush to the south. It's doing all that under the crust. How could it not be mixing? It has to be moving across it at least somewhat, right? That's my gut. But as I said at the start, no official data and no official answer from the USGS on that.
Right. Andre asked, do we know the output of the lava, the flux of the vents? I know there was some figures put out in the beginning of the eruption on like day 2, but I haven't seen anything since then. Has there been anything?
No, that's all we have. And what we had is it was a value that was around 150 cubic meters per second, Andre. So 150 cubic meters per second was the estimate. They said it might be a little bit high because they made some assumptions in their volume calculations there. So maybe it's 140-ish, we'll call it, but somewhere in that range, 150-ish ballpark. But that was on day 2, as Dane said, right? So we saw the gas measurements go from 65,000 on day 1 to 20,000 on day 2 to 10,000 on day 3. So it's like it dropped in half and then dropped in half again, right? Or it dropped in a third and then dropped in a third again. So in that case, I would estimate that the flux has also dropped proportionally, right? We just have to guess here because we don't have exact numbers. But if it's dropped to, I don't know, call it 1/5-ish or so, right? Then you might say that maybe it's somewhere in a range of 30 cubic meters per second or less, right? And we know that long term, the average filling eruption rate is about 4 cubic meters per second. So even if we are at a 20 to 30 range or above 10, that's still pretty strong, and it'll likely still wane a bit more. It still has some more downshifting to do before it's done expending this initial burst here. A good question, Andre. And mahalo for all your help with the time-lapse creation. I really appreciate you, brother.
Yep. Let's do this as the last question. Kenny asks, do you think the wall vent, the one on that western wall, is getting stronger, or is it fading as well?
I feel like it's getting stronger just because we see that vent, the actual cone building around it, right? So we've that I suppose could happen without those big bursts, but we've seen some big bursts of lava there as well. And some of those views, there's lava streaming above, out the side, out the bottom. So it does appear to me that it has strengthened, and it does seem to correspond with the waning of the eastern vents at the same time, right? So. But it's not just that southwest vent, it's kind of the southwest vent on the wall, and the southwest vent through the lake, and the south vent through the lake, and the west vent through the lake are all still pumping a good amount of lava there. Yeah. Yeah, and as we're talking, you can kind of see that I'm letting the live camera play here, and the light's really nice, so here we are focused on those southern fountains on the floor, right? See that you don't see as much of the crust moving. There's a little bit of a glowing line right in here or so, but not a whole lot of cracks as visible. It's still coming through, and it's may still be moving, but moving much more slowly than before. And you see like only red lava out here at the edge, or where it's coming through the cracks here and here and here. You may have seen as I was talking, the southwest vent is largely crusted over now with all the spatter, and you can barely see any flow going through there. You might have seen, maybe to come back up as we talk, but that spot on the west, that western vent, was near the old west vent complex, has also been spattering and made its own little cone. Hard to tell how big it is. It seems like it's actually a little smaller than the one on the wall, but hard to tell with a camera. And yeah, the river really fascinating there too. So I wonder if I can maybe, let's see, I'm a little behind here. I can maybe fast forward it a bit and see what's coming up. There's the southwest vent blowing at the top, but crusted over in the front, and river coming out the bottom there. And over a little bit more overturning here in the south. What's that, Dane?
Saying every once in a while you get those bursts that come through.
Yeah.
Through that
here is that western vent. Here's the western vent there. So there it is. There's that little cone glowing. Occasionally it's bursting up and landing stuff all around here. There's also a pathway underneath here that we've seen. Oh, hand away. There's also a path. Where to go? Well, in this view, just while I'm here, you can see, look at the extent of lava. It's only over here now. Not even down over here anymore. So really a lot less, and we'll see what happens here as it's winding down even more. I do expect it to continue erupting and keep coming out. Like this area seems steady and strong. This area seems steady and strong, and over here seems steady and strong. So we'll see which of those three is the next to actually reduce further, and then what happens next. That's a long-term question. Where is it going to settle and go long-term if it chooses to do that? Likely one of those spots in there. All right, let's see if there's anything else I can pull out of here. I think that's mostly the views I want to show. They are panning across, looking at that northeast part of the crater where the lava had the bathtub ring and frothed over into the edge, where they sampled the lava. Somewhere in here. What else? Wall vent. Vents in the floor. But yeah, lots of cool stuff on there. Here is that western basin. So sometimes it takes looking at the zoomed in version to actually see that it is moving and flowing. Not as fast as it was even a couple days ago, but it is moving. That's interesting to note too. Changes happening constantly. Pull it to current, where it's now 7:30 and dark. So with that, Dane, anything else?
Nope, I think that's good. If you want to just announce the schedule.
Yeah, so our schedule is changing. Well, let's see, one last question throw in here, the depth real quick. So the total depth looks like it went from 388 to 395 or so, 7 meters or so. You're looking at about maybe, what is that? It's a little bit more than 20 feet of filling so far. 7 meters or so far in this West Basin area. Just to answer another question I saw was up here from, who was that question from? Ed maybe, or
Greater Good.
No, from Greater Good. Yeah, and then
yep.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that refers to. Okay, so our schedule. Our schedule is that I am going out of town for a while. I'll be gone for the next month. So Dane will be taking over, doing some special presentations for you guys. It seems eruption is going on pretty steady. If something does change drastically, I'll see what I can do to contribute, but I don't expect to have internet that's very strong, or
Where
it
are you
can't be
going again?
guaranteed. I will be in
Where are you
Europe.
going again?
I will be in Europe. I'll be going to... What's that?
Well, I think I was talking to somebody that's going to the part you're going to, and they did have good internet basically everywhere as of just a couple years ago.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I just don't know, like, the places that I've booked or the cell plan that I'm going to have, whether I'm going to be able to do that or not. Yeah, and not only that, I'm going to be staying in a house with 13 other people. So that's not going to be conducive to any kind of broadcasting at all.
But you're not going to be completely out of the loop, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I may not. Yeah, I may or may not be, right? I'm not guaranteed to be in the loop either. I got a packed schedule as a thing, so. so yeah, Dane will be leading the updates for the next few weeks here. What's your plan for next week, Dane?
Next week we'll probably have some special guests on or something like that. No idea who yet, but we'll figure something out. I've got so much stuff going on still. I'm still like 3 days behind. So when we get there, I'll have a better idea.
Right on. And this will be our last update this week. Is that true?
Yes. This is the last update this week. Next week we'll figure out what we're doing.
All right. So there you go, you guys. There's plenty to keep track of on Hawaii Tracker, hawaiitracker.com. Lots of people going to visit the park and submitting their images as well, so you can check those out, contribute your own. If possible, we'll be trying to share the shorter videos or some of those other pieces of content. But overall, I think you really can enjoy this new webcam from USGS. You can enjoy Two Pineapples live streams. It's really a time to enjoy the beauty of it. There's no worry anymore where the eruption's kind of settled in one spot. There's no earthquakes, no movement of the ground anywhere else to suggest that it's going to move anywhere else besides here. So the worry's gone, and it's just a time to enjoy it. So go check it out, stay safe, and enjoy that. And I will come and offer some commentary to recap in a few weeks here.
Yep, we'll get back to it and, figure out what it's doing by then, type of thing. I appreciate, everybody understanding a little bit of a break. We got a bunch of other stuff going on too.
All right, Dane. So anything else, or I'll say goodbye?
I think that's it.
So thank you guys. I appreciate all of you who are watching, who are donating, contributing to the chat, sharing our videos elsewhere. We really appreciate you. Our whole mission is to share volcano education to improve preparedness and in the context of disasters, right? We'd like to see these eruptions that happen in a crater that we can learn from, so that if something happens in a neighborhood again, or when it happens in a neighborhood again, as it did in 2018, we'll all be better educated and prepared and be able to take action and avoid misinformation and confusion, all of that. So that's our ultimate mission. So I appreciate you guys sticking with us through all that, and we do appreciate it not actually threatening any people apart from its gas nowadays. And yeah, feel like it's an okay time to take some time away. So that being said, from hawaiitracker.com, he's Dane DuPont, I'm Philip Ong, and aloha everybody.